the visual effects in Revelations can be categorized into three separate pieces. One being purely CG shots, so that's computer-generated shots, and those involve just digital environments being the only thing you see on the screen. So there was absolutely no live action.
The idea or concept of the capital of Corellia, which is Coronet, we knew from Extended Universe that the planet was established or colonized by basically space pirates, and it had built up as a large commerce area. It also had a very large shipbuilding facility. So we wanted to illustrate that. We wanted to show that. We also knew that the Coronet was based on a coastal area. It had mountains, hills, forests, trees. It had lots of parks. It was supposed to be a very beautiful city with just lots of commerce. We then needed to provide the actual city. We needed a very large population. The CG artist, Zephyr Mustafa, who did that, I think is about, I want to say like 90 city blocks or something like that of digital creation. It is a combined effort of Terrigen, 3D Max, After Effects compositing, so you're dealing with so many aspects of all building one scene.
Hello there, my name's Adam Benton, otherwise known as Chromecat online, and I'm one of the effects artists on Revelations. I put together a small section of clips to show you some of the things that I brought to the film, which have ranged from concept art to matte painting, ship design and building, and final animated shots. I hope you enjoy it. We visit several planets in Revelations, and with various shots being shared among a group of artists, all using different 3D software, it's important that we remain consistent with the look of the planets. So in this case, I was keen that we should use matte paintings. These were achieved by manipulating a number of high-resolution planet and moon satellite maps provided by NASA. For areas of high detail, I also used orbital satellite images that focused on smaller inland areas of actual Earth landscape, like mountain ranges and forests for instance. These images were then edited, hand-painted and colorized in standard image editing software. The Star Wars databank describes Corellia, which is a key location in our movie, as a beautiful world of fields, forests and seas, so we obviously wanted something similar to our own planet, but with distinctly different continental forms. These texture maps were prepared for use in 3D software, where several layers were derived from them. The colour map, to provide the land and sea colour information, a bump map to add surface depth and texture, and a specular map to allow the seas to catch the sunlight whilst the land remained more matte in appearance. These textures were then mapped to a spherical object in 3D space, where further spherical layers of cloud, atmospheric haze and atmospheric glow were added to create a believable planet. Finally, the rendered mattes are applied to a flat square plane and positioned in the background of a 3D scene. The 3D planet was rendered at fairly high resolutions with appropriate lighting, and from different angles and phases to allow more diversity in scene placement and shot direction. Quarren 3 is the location of the ancient Jedi Temple. It's a barren, arid wasteland shrouded in stormy clouds and layers of dust and ash in the atmosphere. It and the other planets and moons in the Quarren system have been battered by years of Imperial weapons testing. This map was derived in a similar way to Corellia, except that the multiple cloud smoke layers are created with fractal noise and procedural shaders within the 3D software rather than with imagery. This creates quite a different look which I wanted for this planet. This matte only appears briefly in the movie. It's the planet where the first members of what will become the Rebellion are gathering their resources. The live action elements of the scene set here were filmed in a green pastoral area, so I wanted to make the matte look heavily forested, perhaps bordering on the tropical, with mist and less cloud than previous mattes. The name, Bentuine, which is based on my own surname, was suggested by Tom Martinek, who works at ILM. In his free time, Tom kept an eye on our progress and offered advice and suggestions on occasion, which was very cool. One of my first tasks for the film was to come up with a design for Declan's ship. After coming up with a pencil sketch that the director liked, I quickly mocked out a 3D form based on it. This proves useful to see how it's actually going to hold up as a solid 3D form and from all angles. As modelling progressed, I refined and replaced many of the first rough elements, and by the second or third revision of the model, I decided that it would be cool if the large engines mounted on the wings could rotate to offer some kind of fast takeoff and increased manoeuvrability, as befits the needs of a smuggler like Declan. I wanted to make sure that some style motifs from existing Star Wars vehicles were incorporated, so I added some of the shapes and details that are recognisable within the existing ships we all know. I think personality is as important in ship and vehicle design as it is in characters, and to this end I felt that the Cougar had a very predatory look. Its elevated wing and guns gave it a ready-to-pounce-like posture, hence the Cougar name. Finally, the finished model was fully textured and was ready for work in publicity material like the poster amongst other things, and obviously the actual film animation sequences themselves.
Well, one of the most daunting tasks that I took on in Revelations was the shipyard chase. It was one of these things that it went through, I think, about 3 separate animators, and for one reason or another, they couldn't start it through work obligations and things like that. And it came down to, are we going to cut this out of the film, or, Zave, can you give this a whirl? And I said, well, let's give it a shot. And it ended up being, I think, a 2-hour-long conversation with Shane, probably starting at 11 o'clock at night, and we just sketched it out, over the phone. And fleshed out an animatic over the course of 2 weeks, and fleshed out the rest of the animation over, I think, the following 2, and finished it up in another 4 or 5 weeks after that. It's a pretty intense sequence. It's 48 plus shots, and I have to admit, I'm probably the most proud of it as far as content goes.
That should push the bounty up on me.
Now, the second type of visual effects shot that we used includes live action along with CG-generated effects. So that would be, for example, green screen footage of the live talent being composited over purely computer-generated images. Now, one of the first sequences that I personally worked on was the Coronet City alley sequence, which involved green screen footage having to be keyed out and comped over digital environments. That piece of footage actually took probably about 6 months. What I received primarily is just the green screen footage edited to exactly what the director wanted to see. So you have to block out the shots, and then he and I go back and forth just to make sure that the environment is along the lines of what he envisioned. And these are usually done with very primitive geometric objects. Nothing very detailed, just to get the point across of where the person is moving and how she's moving across the digital terrain that will be there at the end of the shot. The practical shoot involved blue lamps that were strategically placed along her path of travel. So we actually introduced those lights in the CG environment just to make it a little more convincing that she's actually moving through that digital environment in the final composite. Now, one of the interesting things about the alley sequence is the droid eye, which is the guardian essentially to the back door of the Coronet City bar. The most interesting thing about this one was that it had to physically interact with Taryn. It didn't have to touch her per se, but it did have to have some gestures, some life of its own. And while it was a mechanical object, we had to give it some personality. Now, what drove that was primarily the actress's performance, and also the audio file that would then be the voice of the droid eye. And the way we did that, just to sell it a little more, we gestured the droid eye so that it made it sound like it was actually enunciating some of the words that we had. And when Taryn perhaps leaned in and she gets a little more confrontational, we have the droid eye react to that. And that little gestures like that make it a little more interesting and more convincing that she's actually interacting with a physical object in the world.
Now, originally in the script we had a bar jump scene in which our heroes were going to jump through a window and jump out of this, this huge tower and land on the ship. Visually, I thought it was just impossible to do because of the technology that we had. I didn't feel we could pull it off and make it real. Zafar took a look at the script and everything and decided it could be done.
When I got wind of the bar jump scene, I actually initially thought that we should actually give it a try. I mean, why just ditch it before we even give it a whirl? Initially, the concept was to try it with all CG elements, so we would have to have digital doubles of the heroes as they're jumping out of the bar.
Now, I didn't like the idea of CG characters, just because even in feature films, I've never really believed them. I just felt that they don't have the same quality that a live person does. So then the thought went into the fact that, well, maybe we could incorporate the actual real actors into the jump.
When it was decided to use live action talent instead of the CG characters for the bar jump sequence, it became my responsibility to provide the animatic or the blueprint to the camera crew so that they knew exactly what to shoot and roughly what angles to shoot to make essentially our jobs easier as the digital artists for this particular sequence.
So we took into the studio and we brought about 4-foot platforms and we stacked 2 of them on top. So you're looking about an 8-foot jump basically. And I would put the actors on them. We would have the camera turned into a certain way that matched each animatic that Zafar had already created. So this was the first time in which CG is dictating to the camera what we need to shoot, which was a great thing to have because typically in every other shot we did for the film, we would shoot it, provide it to the digital crew, and then they would have to match it and make it work. This was a role reversal in which we had to match what they are doing to sell the scene. So with them jump out the window, we show glass burst out, we show them come down, we show the ship come in, they land on the ship, and everything just kind of blended all together, and I was really pleased. It was a tremendous effort in terms of taking live action with CG and composite work, blending the two, and making it sell. For a very low budget independent film, I thought it was a pretty spectacular shot.
So the third category might include where we have live action shots with live environments, so perhaps in the middle of a field like we have in the closing of the film, along with adding digital elements to that. So the primary focus of the shot is real world assets, and we introduce digital assets into that just to embellish the shot a little more, make it a little more visually interesting.
Greetings, I'm Sap from Sweden, one of the many effects artists on the Star Wars fan film Revelations.
My work on Revelations spanned from the tiniest of embellishments, like adding small background items to otherwise mundane scenes, to the creation of complete environments out of nothing. But above all, it was an exercise in creative problem solving. For example, the opening shot of the bar scene. The original green screen element as shot on a jib was a little bit shaky, so it needed to be stabilized. While this greatly simplified the process of adding other elements such as the elevator or the vista of the city out the window, it created a new problem, moving black edges at the edge of the frame. To solve this, I filmed my wife on a makeshift green screen carrying a tray with some glasses and tracked her into the plate. And now the edges can no longer be seen. To complete this futuristic scene, force bars and sparks were added to the dancer, and with some glow and a little smoke, we have the final result. The same principle was used throughout the bar scene. Some shots, such as this, actually had to be masked by hand for every single frame. Ouch! Another example is the closing scene of the movie. The scene had no establishing shot. To fix this, a simple high-resolution still image from the location was embellished with some mountain ranges and ruins. Then, an establishing camera move was added by making the background plate a 3D layer in After Effects. It is important to do these things in true 3D, since simply panning a 2-dimensional plate around looks very fake. To this plate, a scaled-down copy of our performers were added. Finally, the plate was further embellished by adding a small armada of ships as well as CG pilots, aliens and droids. Still, the end result was missing something. There was a sense of lack of depth due to the flatness of the camera move. Then one day, while visiting the local zoo with my children, I had an idea. I filmed one of those funny little monkeys doing his thing in a tree. Back home, I stabilized this footage, and using the sky as a natural blue screen, I now had some wildlife available. By tracking a pair of CG wings onto this monkey, we finally had transformed our quite normal zoo dweller into an intergalactic alien. And suddenly, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Filing the shot off with a bit of lens flare and the sunset color correction, and there you have it. A brand new establishing shot made out of stone knives, bear skins, and a Swedish monkey. Imagine that.
One of the benchmarks that people often ask us, even those in the industry, are how many visual effects shots are in Revelations. And to be truthful, we really don't know. We don't know how to quantify it, because every single shot in Revelations, barring, I think at last count was somewhere below 10, had some sort of CG element that was introduced into it.
It's very unique and different in terms of how most films are made. Most of them already have storyboards of concepts already created. I let our artists almost own a piece of the scene themselves, because Coronet is very much Zafer Mustafa's own vision of what it looked like based on the direction that we're giving them. So I think by them owning a piece of it and building some of it themselves got them more involved in the scene. I think it made them much more diverse too.
Well, working on Revelations has been truly a labor of love. It has been a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work. Even a 9-to-5 job, this would be kind of pushing its limits. And on top of your normal job, it makes it something that you're obviously very impassioned about to finish, and just see the final product. I mean, it really is magical. It's the final product. I think is going to just blow people out of the water. I mean, it certainly does impress me.